particularly under your chin. Do you like chocolate?
I do like chocolate. And
Yes, you do.
it smells of chocolate.
When I buy new plants, that pot is full of root. And I've learnt to pot them on immediately. I get them into a larger pot. It means they've got time to stand and grow.
You see, I come on this show just to get information out of you two.
Why do you think I'm here?
That's what the whole programme's about, isn't it? We all bounce off one another, and then out comes a little gem of information, and you think, I'll follow that up and I'll do it my way. Darling, that's so country heist.
Hello, welcome to Talking Dirty episode 10 over at East Ruston Old Vicarage in so many shades of beautiful denim. We have Alan, Edward, Herbert Gray, our happy and extremely handsome horticulturalist.
And over in Cambridgeshire, dressed in a gorgeous, gorgeous green, we have Thordis, Maria, I've forgotten the name, Sophia, Friedrichsen. Gosh, I mean, it's a wonder I don't forget my own names because I can't remember more than two words to string together today. It's ridiculous, isn't it?
I do love the anarchy of the start of the episode. And hiding behind the usual mystery window, we have this week's special guest. So on my drum roll, who's behind the window today?
Hello.
It's Margaret Hope.
Do you have a middle name, Margaret?
I have two.
Good. Join the club.
So I'm Margaret Eugenia Irene Hope.
How lovely.
Wow.
Eugenia.
Yes.
Love it.
Any stories behind those names? Why did you get such a
I can't
fulsome
remember.
name?
I can't remember why I'm Eugenia, but I know I'm Irene after my maternal grandma.
Oh, yeah, mine have grandmother references.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, mine don't. They have grandfather references because they are the names of both my grandfathers, Edward and Herbert.
Now, Margaret, you have, you're a fabulous artist. You've joined us because we've known you for years in Norfolk's gardening world. You're a great gardener, I think a former fashion designer as well, and a really inspiring artist. So tell us a bit about you.
Well, I studied at the London College of Fashion. I have worked in the industry for about 35 years, various roles, and then just decided that we'd leave London and move to Bedfordshire, and then we moved to Norfolk. So my mother was a great gardener, and I just used to despair when I couldn't get her on the phone, and I'd just say, "Where were you in the garden?" I think, "What is it with this woman in the garden?" And I've become my mother. So my daughter rings me, but unfortunately for me, I've got my phone in my pocket, and I can speak to her, but she always says, "Let me guess, you're in the garden." So yeah.
When did the bug really take hold?
I think when we moved to Bedfordshire and I wasn't working full time anymore, and we were fortunate that we had a neighbour whose son was a landscape designer. And he came in and sort of got our garden sorted out for us. And then, of course, the big reveal was when we used to holiday in Norfolk. And I made this sort of, let me say, pilgrimage to Alan. And that was the start of it. I've never turned back. So East Ruston, we just kept visiting and visiting until we moved to Norfolk. And that was it, really.
Did you know that, Alan?
Not really, no. I mean, I got to know Margaret really well because Margaret is the kind of lady, she's a very warm person. I know you're listening and I know you can see me, but I've got to say, she's a very warm person. And we kind of clicked together when we started talking. And I always complimented her on her dress because it was absolutely fabulous. And she'd say, "Well, these came from Primarché, darling." Well, I mean, because they didn't probably, but that's what she told me. And she always looked so well turned out and lovely. And then I discovered that she was an artist as well. And she had an exhibition here in the garden in one of our outbuildings. She very kindly gave me a piece of her art, which today hangs in my back hallway. How would you describe it, Margaret? Because I find it very difficult because it's a combination of copper wire, ceramics and beads.
I'd just say that they're sculptural wall hangings. They're
Yes.
pretty much textured clay rolled out, and I only make wall hangings, and they have, it's basically fabric in clay. So although I don't design garments anymore, I'm quite happy with clay. And I didn't want to make pots anymore, or I just thought I can't do anything with pots. With wall hangings, you can do anything. And then I just buy, I'm looking at one now, I buy all sorts of beads and all necklaces, bracelets.
Embellishments.
And yes, and then I put them together with copper wire. And Alan's is, well, it was supposed to be for his potting shed. It was around the time that you were just getting your potting shed sorted out.
I know, I liked it too much to put it in the potting shed.
So he's got little bits of everything to do with him and Graham in that piece, I think. So we did I put some coins in there because I knew there was being money spent?
I think so.
That's true all the time.
It's
So
interesting that you say it's like a piece of draped fabric, because it is, but I wouldn't want to wear it because I think it might chafe.
Yes, body armour. Yeah, I'm fortunate that I can just transfer sort of what I love to do into something else. So although now it's suffering because of course I'm in the garden, so I'm not doing very much clay work, but I think when the winter comes I'll start again.
Clearly fashion is a huge influence in your art, but do you ever find that the time in the garden inspires you, if not necessarily in the form of your art, but maybe in the kind of colours or just sort of sparking something?
Oh yeah, because when we left Bedfordshire and went to Norfolk, we started with a half-acre garden, and I mean I just was lost, and I'd buy one thing here, one thing there, and I just thought I'm never going to get a grip of this. So I started going to Alan's garden tours, and one of the things that he actually said that stuck with me is that it's all about volume. There is no point buying one thing, which was heaven to me. And you just learn that you actually, if you're going to make an impact, you've got to buy a few. So what I did, so this is the fashion side, I thought, well, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'll do everything by colour. And it'll either work or it won't. And that way I could put the plants that I wanted together and they wouldn't look odd because they were pretty much the same colour. And of course, then you're just grateful. You know, if you can find something in white that's going to keep flowering, great. Blue, yellow, orange, dark. I had a dark leafed garden as well. And then, of course, you know, you're very grateful to begin with. And then, of course, you start to get picky. And I moved on from it being enough that it was colour. It then had to be texture. So then I would only want certain things if they looked a particular way. So it just goes, I mean, Alan will say, it just goes on and on. You don't stop. It just gets worse. The addiction gets worse. So, yeah, gardening by colour was very, very helpful. And also, as I say, the garden tours at Alan's were just inspirational. So he's got a lot to answer for.
I'm still doing them, Margaret.
Yeah, I've never heard it described that way, but it's so right that when you first get into gardening, you look at it with completely different eyes to when you're then 5-10 years in. And you're right, you start off just grateful that things grow, that things flower, and then you get pickier and pickier, and you want more and more specific things. You want longer seasons of interest. That's a very insightful comment. Yeah.
And then you get ruthless.
Well, it's all part of the growing process, I think. I don't mean growing plants, but the growing of your mind. And how you see things and how you want to see things and how you want things to look. It's a very personal thing. And I mean, you get to the stage, like I'm at the stage now where, well, if you don't like it, I don't care. It's my garden. I'll do what I want. It pleases me. But you can't please everybody. But as long as you can do that, I think, you know, your heart and soul will be in it and you'll just adore it and love it.
You're right about the ruthless stage as well, because I spent a long time and I'm still sort of in the transitional phase, but a long time pingling about and thinking, oh, I don't want to cut that back. And now things kind of get hoiked out and chopped back.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I wish I'd done earlier this year. There's a chap called Jack Wallington, and he's a garden designer and he lives in, I think, Clapham in London. and I often see his posts on Twitter and stuff like that. And he posted, I think, probably about the middle to end of June. Now it's time to get your snips out and snip back all your salvias, shrubby salvias. And I looked at mine and I thought, no, I can't do it. Now I wish I had, because as he says, you know, you get a resurgence of new growth and you get fresh flowers and all the rest of it. So it's a jolly good tip.
Well, at least that gives us all hope that we're, you know, even Alan Gray isn't 100% ruthless all the time in the garden. Now, Margaret, we love it. We love it when our guests bring show and tell. And I think somewhere around you, you've got one or two things to show off.
Well, this is a story. Of course, it has to relate to Alan. So I don't know if you can see it. I mean, this is just a tiny, tiny cutting. And this is Persicaria Purple Fantasy. And I didn't know Alan very, very well, but I'd been to a Gardener's World show and saw this Persicaria and dithered a bit. And then by the time I'd made up my mind, it had sold out. I came home, went through the internet, couldn't find it anywhere. So I thought I'll send a little note to Alan, who very kindly answered. And his first response to me, never heard of it. But he didn't give up. And I remember, Alan, that you actually got some from Holland.
Yeah.
In the end. I can't remember how long ago it was. It's got to be maybe 8 years.
Oh, could be easily. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just one of those plants that is just, there's just something about it. I mean, I love Persicarias anyway because I like the texture. But this plant, it took me ages to work out that you could propagate it. And I remember coming to Alan's, he said, oh, I've got one put to one side for you. And he did, and I bought it. And then I remember going back to his garden. It was massive. He put it in the ground, and it was absolutely massive. And I thought, oh my goodness me. Anyway, it has proved to be one of those plants. You can just take the tiniest little snip of it and put it in the ground, and it just goes crazy. And we had a plant sale at the church, and I managed to sort of get a load of these together. And I mean, they were going like hotcakes. So this is my Alan plant.
Well, I have to say, Margaret, that since those early days when we didn't have Persicarias, there's several Purple Fantasy, Red Dragon, or lots of others as well.
Yeah.
But they are such good doers. Now they're everywhere like a rash. I mean, they spread incontinently almost.
Exactly.
And they are very, very easy to propagate. And they are such lovely plants. But it is one plant that you have to cut back, because it grows so luxuriantly, and you really, to get the best foliage, you can cut it back as many as 2 or even 3 times in a season.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it takes about, possibly about 2 weeks for it to pop through. I mean, I literally just put the roots in, and it works every time. But I tell you, at our plant sale, because I managed to get some quite big in a pot, they were just like flying. I thought, great.
And I think people could see from your show and tell, and we'll get some pictures on the video version. But the foliage, you talk about texture, but Alan, you said there are several different types of Persicaria now, and they bring all these very exciting splashes on their leaves.
Yeah.
Well, they're not really a flowering plant. They have little white flowers, but they're of no consequence at all. You really do grow them for their leaves and their shape. And they're just so exciting. And, you know, if you've got a gappy garden, buy half a dozen of these, split them in half and pop them through it. And it, you know, there goes another piece of advice for, similar to what Margaret said. If you've got a few gaps in your new garden or something, and you put that through the garden, it just unifies everything and brings it all together. But the only thing is you're going to have to watch out for is that it doesn't take over.
Well, that's right. Well, this year, I mean, I'm not a keen fan of marigolds, but I've become keen because they're very good. I planted up a border with marigolds, red dragon, and a cosmos xanthos, which I've seen in your garden, that lemon. And when you get the marigold next to the foliage of the cosmos, and then you've got that red dragon in the background, it was unbelievable. And they're not, I mean, I do like all of them. But I mean, together, that the foliage of the cosmos really softened the harshness, what I think is harshness of the marigolds, because they're just useful plants. They're just wonderful for colour, aren't they?
No, were they sort of French marigolds or African or that sort of thing?
No, they were the French ones.
Yeah, But I mean, the thing about French marigolds is everybody sort of said, oh, they're dreadful common things, because they're one of the first things that the garden centres sell even before the frosts are finished, because they're
Yeah.
very easy to grow and all the rest of it. But they are one of the longest flowering annuals. And one I discovered a few years ago is called, I think it's Konstance, Konstance. And Konstance is an orange marigold, but it's kind of sort of soft orange with a bit of mahogany in there. But the great thing about it is it will flower right up until the end of November if you've got the space for it. And it just gives that long season of colour. So if you don't get bored with it, just enjoy it.
Yeah.
You make another excellent point, Margaret, which is some plants you might not necessarily adore on their own, but in combination with something else, it is often the planting combinations that allow plants to really sing and shine.
That's it.
Now, you also have, I think you've got secondary show and tell. You might be our first guest to bring more than one show and tell to share.
Well, this sounds like an Alan Gray appreciation show, but
That's fine.
Long ago.
Keep going, Margaret, keep going.
Well, I remember when you did a plant arrangement, and I think it was below the Brughansia, and it was a Euphorbia, and I didn't believe it was a Euphorbia, and I think is it called Silver Fog?
No, it's called Diamond Frost.
Oh, right. Well, my friend who sent them said that they were Silver Fog.
It could be because somebody could well have renamed that plant.
Ah.
Or it could have just got changed.
Well, at the beginning, obviously we're growing like crazy, and I've got a friend in London, and I thought I'd give her a surprise. So I sent her what I call joy in a box. So I sent her some little tiny seedlings of cosmos, other little things, all wrapped up in a tiny little box. And I sent her a text that I've sent you joy in a box. And anyway, that she received them, and that was great. And then I got a text from her, probably about a month ago, and she said, "You've got your own joy in a box coming." And this was my joy in a box. And they were tiny. They had about 3 leaves, but she didn't tell me what they were. And I am absolutely in love with these because I've got them out at the front. So somehow we've been able to sort of transmit to each other. And I mean, when they were tiny, they didn't have any flowers on. And I said, "Jill, are these euphorbias?" And she said, "Yes." So I'm going to nurture them like crazy so that I can have them running right the way along the front garden in a narrow border next year. So yeah, I've been very fortunate.
I think that is the most charming thing that you've said so far, really, because I think the phrase "joy in a box" should be transmitted to everybody, and all gardeners could send fellow gardeners joy in a box. I think it's absolutely lovely. Well,
I was missing her, and we always talk gardens. We've been friends for 30 odd years, more than that. And it's just lovely. And of course, her cosmos are like 6 foot tall nearly that I sent her, which I'd grown from seed. And I've got these little babies. So yeah, I'm really pleased with them.
It was funny when I was missing Alan during lockdown, and we were talking quite a lot, but I attempted to send Alan joy in an envelope, but actually I just sent you great annoyance in an envelope because you said, I think really you were after the yellow form of the Chilean glory vine.
Yes.
And I didn't have any of that, but I did have home collected seed of the red version with a little kind of yellow end to the tube. And I thought, well, I'll just send him some seeds. But I was concerned about, COVID and licking the envelope and stuff. And I didn't want to sellotape it up in case it ripped or whatever. So I thought, well, it's an envelope within an envelope. What could possibly go wrong? And the next thing, Alan opens his envelope at East Ruston Old Vicarage, and there's like an explosion of little Eccremocarpus seeds flying all over the office.
I'm sure they were well received, weren't they, Alan?
Yeah, they were, and I did manage to germinate some, so that was okay.
Oh, excellent.
Now, Margaret, the other thing we like to do with our guests, aside from show and tell, is share some FLOMO. My FLOMOs, actually, it's been inspired by something I've grown this year. And for anyone who doesn't know, FLOMO is that kind of fear of missing out you get about a plant you spotted in someone's garden, on social media, in a magazine, and you just really want to grow it. Well, I grew is it Calistephus?
Calistephus.
Basically the annual aster. I had never heard of them before, but I saw them in the Chiltern seed catalogue, and because we all know I'm a sucker for oranges and apricots and blushing shades, so I thought I've got to grow this I think it was king size apricot, I think I dropped the seed tray and killed off several because I'm butterfingers, but I got one really strong plant and it's come into flower. It is to die for. The blooms last for ages. They kind of age and get this like antique browning to the edges of the petals. And they start this sort of very fresh lemon and then fade through this like Dulux color chart of lemons and apricots. And then I realized there are other Callistophus out there and I must grow many more next year. So that's my FLOMO, all of the Callistophus I can get my hands on.
Were they from the Japanese cut flower range?
There's a king size range and I chose the apricot one. I assume there are there's a king size series. I have spotted there is some sort of Duchess series or Duchesse. So I think Duchesse apricot is very high on my wish list for next year, but there are purples and other tones.
They used to have in Chiltern Seeds, they used to have a list of Japanese style cut flowers, and they used to have Celosias, which is known as coxcombs in England and things like that. And there was a giant aster in there, I remember, that they used just primarily as a cut flower.
I mean, I just had never heard of them before, but they're these fabulous chrysanthemum sort of pom-poms, and I haven't cut any because I've only got one plant, and I'm quite enjoying looking at them on the patio, but they look like they'd make really fabulous cut flowers.
Thordis, you know better than that. It's Patio, darling, Patio.
So that's my FLOMO. Margaret, what is yours?
Well, my FLOMO is a plant that I have grown before and was introduced to me by my gardening neighbour when I lived in Conham. And it is Ricinus communis, which is the tropical castor oil. We have got a bed here, which is called the hotbed. And I've never been keen on sort of yellows, particularly in the garden, but I've grown to love them. So we've got
You're wearing it.
Chartreuse, if you don't mind, Alan. Chartreuse.
It's my kind of yellow.
So we've got yellow, red, orange, anything of that hue, and the Ricinus is missing. It's like a hand, isn't it, Alan? I didn't see any in your garden this week when I went. We have
some in the exotic garden, but I think they went in very late, so they may have got overtaken by other plants. But I mean, going back to Ricinus, call it what you will, it is the annual castor oil plant. And the best variety, I think, well, there's several varieties. I mean, some of them grow taller than others, but the one that I like best of all is called Carmencita. And Carmencita has these huge maple-like leaves, red stems, and the most really, really piercing red seed capsules. And they're absolutely charming. And I mean, the longer the season progresses, the better they get. So it's one of those plants that instead of going over in the autumn, it just gets better and better and better. It's a lovely annual, and it's relatively easy from seed.
And you have these seeds, Alan, do you?
Yeah.
I'll see you at the end of the season.
Okay.
So that's one of them. And the other one, when you asked me what I might like, I'd forgotten that I'd like it, and I remembered. And it will go beautifully with this, with the silver fog, the Euphorbia. At the front is African Bride. It's a Nigella, which is white with a very, very dark eye. And I'd forgotten that I wanted it. And thank you for reminding me that I wanted it. So next year, I'm hoping that I'll have that. So I'll have a whole row of different whites and textures and all sorts of frilliness at the front of the house. So those are my two.
Absolutely lovely.
Do you know, people think of Nigella and they may just think of one type, but there has been, I don't know when the breeding work was done, but you can get hold of so many different types. I absolutely love Nigella hispanica, which is a kind of a bit darker than that paler blue of the standard Nigella. And I mean, African Bride is a real stunner.
Great source of seeds of Nigella is Derry Watkins Special Plants, because she actually was on Twitter, had a new one this year, even to her. And I mean, she's been growing plants for years and years and years, which has got piercing blue flowers. I don't know the name of it, but she was growing it for the first time. So we might possibly see that on her seed list.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah.
Well, we got 2 FLOMOs for the price of one with Margaret. Alan Gray, what's your FLOMO this week?
Well, my FLOMO is a plant that I've actually just got, but I didn't know I was going to get it because a couple of weeks ago we had, last Saturday in actual fact, we had our garden event here in Plant Fair, and Bob Brown arrived, and amongst the plants he was selling was something called Pollia japonica, Now, I'd never heard of Pollia japonica, but Pollia japonica is a shade lover. And there's an area of the garden I'm planting that is in quite dense shade at the moment. I'm going to lessen the shade this winter by taking some branches above this area out. But this plant came along and I thought, oh, I must try this in shade. It has walls of green leaves, you know, sort of rounded around the stem, upright panicles of small white flowers. They're not showy, they're very discreet and in rather good taste, I have to say. And these flowers are followed by dark blue berries, which are interesting. And they're very shiny. They're like dark blue porcelain berries and they look absolutely lovely. And I'm planting these two plants the other day and I noticed that there's roots going or shoots going round and round the pot. And I thought, this is a thug. Be sure you want it. But I think that possibly in somewhere where it's dense shade, a thug can be useful. And they can colonize areas like that. And, you know, I can have early spring bulbs coming through it and it's just going to be lovely. So I'm thrilled with it. Pollia japonica, denoting, of course, that it comes from Japan.
That's great.
Funny you should mention your plant fair because I basically walked around it thinking I am just inundated with FLOMO. It was like a tidal wave of FLOMO just washing over me. And I didn't even get the chance to go around your garden. And perhaps the greatest sorrow is that I was there helping my mum out on her Sprig Art Studio stall. Quick plug, go check out her Etsy. But the car was absolutely full of stock. So there was literally no room for plants. And to add insult to injury, Monk Silver Nursery had Chrysanthemum orange, the Dixter orange that you told me I needed to get in last week's podcast, and also Esther, which I've realised I also need in my life, and I didn't have room for either. But fortunately, that nursery is very close to where I live, so I think I'll be popping there soon to add them to my garden.
Absolutely, they're two very good plants.
Do you know what, we've nearly run out of time, but if we can, I've dropped my notebook, but if we can, let's fit in one question before we have to wind up our Talking Dirty this week. Jean has been watching some of the tutorials on the Get Gardening channel. If you're listening to the audio podcast, do head over to the YouTube channel where you just pop Get Gardening into the YouTube search bar, and there are so many tutorials and plant profiles and plant appreciation. Kind of hundreds of these videos that we've made over the past 5 or 6 years. And Jean had watched your clematis cuttings video, Alan, which she described as a true masterclass. Having basically never had any luck trying to take clematis cuttings in her life, she's had quite a lot of success, but she's wondering now, does she leave her 5 or so cuttings in the same pot through the winter, or should she pot them up individually now?
I think at this late juncture, I mean, nearly to the middle of September, I would leave them in the pot throughout the winter and I would pot them individually next spring. And if she does it the first half of March, if she could do it in the first half of March, especially if the weather's mild or if she's got a cold greenhouse, even better. And if she divides them up individually and pots them into a nice gritty compost, clematis have deep roots. So the one little tip I would add is that she put them into a long tom, which is a deep flower pot. Nobody can find quite why they're called long toms, but I'd like to meet Tom to find out why. Anyway, part them into long toms, and then if she grows them on steadily, they'll be ready for planting in the garden by the end of June.
Oh, more success.
More success. That's what this program's about.
If you would like to ask a question, really easy. You can comment on in the YouTube comment section underneath one of our podcasts, or you can email hello@getgardeningnow.co.uk. You can even attach a photo, which will help Alan and the experts really get to the bottom of your planting problem, your identification, whatever it might be. And with that, I think we're probably going to have to wind up another edition of Talking Dirty. What are you planning in the garden over the next week or so, Margaret?
I think I'm going to pull a lot of things out and start again. I've got a cool border, which I'm thinking time to sort of fiddle around, you know. So we'll see. I think it needs to be sorted for autumn. So yeah.
It's a great time for it. I'm thinking exactly the same thing, Alan.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, you overhaul, you take out, you replace. It's a great time of the year for puddling in, which is something that I do quite a lot of. We grow rows of plants like Michaelmas daisies outside in an area, maybe like the vegetable garden or something like that. The day before we want to move them, we water them heavily, then we dig them up and we plant them into a hole. We backfill the hole with soil, but we don't firm the soil in. We puddle it in. So you put a 2-gallon watering can, fill it full and just puddle around the plant. That ensures that the plant's roots are in contact with the soil. And if you do it quickly and judiciously, and you can arrange to do it on a dull day, the plant won't even notice.
Well, there you go. Tip of the week to finish things
Indeed.
Thank you, Margaret, so much for coming to join us for a spot of dirty talk.
It's been lovely.
Happy
Absolutely
gardening
lovely.
all. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
You're looking
You're
very,
very coordinated with your dog's collar.
We try, don't we, Lily? Actually, she goes quite well with the wall.
She does.
I've got a book here because I'm not very good at remembering everything. So if my eyes go down, it's the book.
Margaret,
Yes.
Margaret, behind you on your right-hand side, is that hat with feathers on it?
I knew. A girlfriend bought it for me for my 60th birthday.